Vivienne and I go back 14 years. I was her first chief of staff at Socos. Vivienne is an incredible PhD, theoretical neuroscientist, transgender, special needs mom, multiple-time entrepreneur, professor at Berkeley. And I had the privilege of helping to build Socos, Vivienne's research lab incubator, which I'm sure going to be hearing a lot about. At the time, AI wasn't really well understood. We were talking about neural networks, we were talking about machine learning, and I mostly was just out there trying to hire because Vivienne would say, I need an engineer who works in these 3 languages, and by the way, they can't be a white man from Stanford, and I need that 3 days from now, go. And I had the incredible challenge and privilege of being trusted to go do things I had no business trying. And Vivienne would be on stage and we'd get messages from Shanghai being, hi, I happen to be really interested in volunteering for Socos. And so we ended up building on Vivienne's hustle and my ability to manage the inbox, a really incredible team that went on to do, as we're going to hear, a lot of really incredible things. Vivienne and I reconnected recently. And I don't have kids yet. My fiance and I want them. But as we struggle with what is the role of raising children, building teams in a world that is changing as rapidly as it is, in a world that feels like the brakes have been cut, and yet we have to maintain hope, there's nobody I would rather hear from and nobody that I personally will otherwise turn to than my dear friend Vivienne Ming. So let's give a very warm, responsive welcome. Please stand up and let's welcome to the stage Vivienne Ming.
All right, so I guess my big ugly face is gonna hang behind me the entire time. Oh gosh. I will confess, as I showed up today, I asked Xander, so what did I say I was going to talk about today? The cool thing about my job is it gives me lots of stories. Actually, this is true. When I was a graduate student, my advisor said to me these words, which are more profound than any of you that aren't scientists perhaps can fully appreciate. Science is a story. And that story should be about an hour long, or 30 minutes, or now 29. He got that from his advisor when he was a graduate student. And that advisor just won the Nobel Prize in Physics this year, John Hopfield. So it's incredibly important to understand how much of the world, including the hard numbers of science, are a story. And interestingly, I walked in today prepared to tell a couple of different stories, not remembering which one I'd promised to share. And so let me solicit. I have the coolest job in the entire world. There are various things I pretend to do as I pretend to be an adult. But my actual day job is I run this philanthropic lab, nowadays called the Human Trust. Because it's a data trust, which is a legal thing. People bring me interesting problems about people. I get introduced on stage as being an AI expert. I'm not. I study people. I just happen, by quirks of fate, I use machine learning to study people, which gives me an interesting insight into what's different between machine intelligence and human intelligence. But I use it to study people. So here's my offer to you with our remaining 27 minutes together. Pick a story. We have How to Robot Proof Your Kids. In 2014, I was invited to the Department of Education, if any of you have forgotten what that is. You probably remember. So, and that was their question. Dr. Ming, how do we robot proof our kids? Which I always thought would make a great book title. My publisher doesn't agree, so the book is now titled Robot Proof: When Machines Have All the Answers, Build Better People. My actual counter proposal was Robot Proof: When Machines Have All the Answers, Be a Problem Maker. I didn't even want problem solvers. and this is what Robin learned. Working with me is genuinely like an episode of House. I'm probably not quite as psychologically torturous as House is as a character, but that's what I need. Pitch me an idea, and I'm going to shoot down 99% of them. And I need you to keep pitching. It's brutal. It's hard to do. So I have this one book about robot proofing. That's one story I can share. The other one is from my next book that's coming after it, called Small Sacrifices. The subtitle of that one is The Science, Economics, and Story of Purpose. And this is a story that has a really bad start and a pretty hopeful end, and then a choice we all get to make. So does the AI one. So very genuinely, do you want a story about AI right now? They're both great. I only get to tell really fun stories. Or do you want a story about human purpose? Oh my goodness, you're back and forth on me. Raise a hand for, can I do both in, 25 minutes. I usually take 25 minutes to clear my throat. Okay. All right, how can I do this in 25 minutes? First, I will talk fast. I'll cut out all the dirty jokes, and we'll just go from there. Boo? All right. Okay. Let's start here. This is the most important question I could ask any audience about AI. Are you happy? Here's a happy person. I see a number of happy people. It sounded like there were some free drinks last night. There's, for some, happiness in that. Here's a slightly more complex question. This is actually the important one. If you were not, statistically speaking, given the size of this room, somebody isn't. If you were not happy, what would you do about it? How would you change? Either in the moment or over the long haul. One of the more interesting findings in science, at least the science of people, is that intelligence and happiness are uncorrelated. But if you thought of unhappiness as a problem to solve, surely smarter people, they are better at solving all the other problems. Why not that one? Such a fundamental problem, and it's uncorrelated. That's not to say that smarter people are less happy. There just doesn't seem to be a relationship. So let me roll out this possible explanation. And I say possible knowing that I'm always right about everything, so of course this is the truth you're about to hear. You are welcome to have your own opinion. I'm big enough to allow you to be wrong. But what if this isn't about intelligence or happiness, but it's about how we measure intelligence? Because how do we do it? For an IQ test, for a more modern concept like G, working memory span, essentially we ask a series of questions that have right and wrong answers. And if you get more right answers, you're smarter. Pretty straightforward. It's pretty much how every school in the entire world works, regardless of whether that's what we really need out of humanity at this moment. So let's call that, those problems, those questions, we're going to call them well-posed problems. They're well-posed because they have explicitly right and wrong answers. Makes it easy to score. There's a reason why we give lectures to students and then we give them tests that have well-posed problems on them, because how else are you going to decide who gets to go to Harvard and, God forbid, who has to go to Brown, or whatever. I'm only speaking from a Harvard perspective, which I did not attend. Or as I should say, a school near Boston. Well, there's a whole other class of problems. I and others, we're going to call them ill-posed problems. Forget wrong and right answers. We don't even know what the question is. Happiness is an ill-posed problem. because the right answer for if I'm feeling depressed, how do I become happy is unique to you and you, but you right now in this moment might be a different problem 10 minutes from now or in a slightly different context. So now we have these two very different classes of problems, well-posed and ill-posed. Happiness is an ill-posed problem. We define intelligence as your ability to answer well-posed problems. If we're scared of what AI might do to our futures as individuals, our companies, our communities, and our kids, then we have to understand the following. Jerks like me build AI by taking all of the well-posed problems that have ever been committed to the internet and training the AI to answer the known answers. And for a large language model, for example, that is self-defining. It's the next word in the sentence. You make the model big enough, and you just say, what's the next word? And you score it as such, or the other AI-based Nobel Prize this year was for protein folding. That was based on what's called reinforcement learning. Here, the answer is a game that you have come up with a score for. And the goal of the AI is simply to maximize its score. So who knew protein folding was a game, that it could be defined like Go or chess or Flappy Birds, but essentially, once you put it in that context, it's all the same, right and wrong answers. There now exists an intelligence in the world that is not just modestly better at answering well-posed questions than human beings, it is dramatically better. Is it always right? For you? On every subject? My graduate students are amazing. They are world experts in the thing they are studying. More so than me. This is an hour a week of my life at best. It's 24/7 for them for 5 to 7 years. There are 6 other people in the world that care as much about this problem as they do. So why am I there? I'm there because my students know everything about that problem and understand none of it. I'm there to bring some understanding, context, perspective. I've done this for 30 years. They're just getting started. I'm actually not training them in the knowledge. Anyone who thinks the point of a PhD is to learn a bunch of facts, it is not. Unfortunately, a lot of scientists think that too. It's to learn the wisdom of what do you do with this? And that's my job as a mentor. That was my advisor's job and his before them. When I say AI knows everything, but understands nothing, now I'm not just talking about an esoteric question of theoretical neuroscience. I mean everything. Again, can it get things wrong? Absolutely. But these models, and it really doesn't matter that much which one we're talking about, Gemini or GPT or Claude or the various free versions, these are astonishing systems for answering well-posed questions. And in most cases, they are better than us. They are certainly fairly well presented, better than the average person who would actually normally be answering that question. So what's left? Why are any of us here? Why do I hire people? AI knows everything. It understands nothing. When I interact, in my case with Gemini, for various technical reasons, I have a long history with Google, it feels so much to me like interacting with one of my graduate students. It knows everything. But when I'm working with my students and my employees, what I would never do is assume they fully understood what I asked them. What I would never do is take their first answer and say, done. Everything is a dynamic. It's an interaction. My wisdom, limited though it may be, and their knowledge, back and forth. Now, maybe my goal with the Gemini is not to impart my wisdom. My goal is to solve a problem, which could range from, Dr. Ming, my daughter has 500 seizures a day, please save her life. Actually, my 2 newest projects at the Human Trust are predicting breast cancer risk 30 years ahead of time. Instead of building a giant model to predict the next word in the sentence, what if we could build a giant model, predict the next day in your life, and run it out for 30 years and see, does your story have Alzheimer's in it? Does your story have breast cancer? Does your story have you dropping out in high school or radicalizing in either direction? What could we do today that would change that story? So this is the crazy ambition of the kind of work we do at the Human Trust. And these problems come in, and we're trying to make progress. And that means suddenly out of nowhere, I need to be an expert in something I'm not an expert in. That's part of, frankly, what makes my job so cool. Dr. Ming, is postpartum depression just in your head, or is it a real problem? Well, it turns out about 14% of women, of moms, around the world, pretty much unrelated to demographics or part of world, will experience postpartum depression. It is the most common complication in pregnancy. So, okay, but is it just the baby blues or not? Well, during the pandemic, I got brought a related problem, and we began to look at how do hormones and genetics and neuroimaging and everything relate to suicide risk. We began to look through all of this. And in the end, we actually found an epigenetic biomarker by using AI to explore epigenetics. If you don't know what that is, that's just the way in which your behavior and the world around you actually modifies your own DNA, causing changes. For example, if you're a pasty North Sea Viking type like me, and you were never meant to be in the California sun, when you go out and your skin tans, something I've theoretically heard happens, that's an epigenetic change. Similarly, when you form a memory, that's a part of that, is an epigenetic change. So incredibly important. If you're ever in this debate, is it all genetics? Is it not? Moo. That's an absurd question. But in this particular case, what we saw is not only is it not just in your head, we can literally see it in your biology in a blood test. So now I have a company this month is bringing the first ever biological test for postpartum depression to market. Thank you. This is a bit of an aside, but every single male VC we've pitched said, "Are you sure that's a big enough market?" So insanity prevails. All right, good shit. How am I going to transition this over? Yeah. So we have this future as parents, as employers, as citizens of the world, as far as I'm concerned, to think what the world needs is not another kid that can answer a well-posed question. The paradox, by the way, is going to be that if you read the book, is you actually need to be able to answer those well-posed questions anyways, because you need to know when it's wrong. So I am not saying don't go to school. What I am saying is our schools should be about things like resilience. Psychological construct defined as your likelihood of finding success after experiencing failure. How do you build resilience? All evidence is from my research and others is it is a developable quality. It's not, like I was saying, there's nothing is fully genetically predetermined. So this is something you can change, and you can change all throughout your lifetime. Well, a necessary ingredient is failure. If you're not experiencing it, then you're certainly not building it. But it isn't just failure leading to success. How do you build in someone a belief that their hard work will pay off that is so strong they will keep pushing through even after experiencing failure? There's so much I could say, but I'm going to save my last 10 minutes here. By the way, I'm going to hang around for a while afterwards, so I won't do questions because we're doing 2 talks in less than 30 minutes, but I'll hang around if anyone has questions about the actual science of any of this, please. So resilience or perspective taking, better defined for me than empathy. Do you understand why other people do what they do? I get all these problems. People introduce me on stage as an AI expert. I will tell you, 99% of all the problems I'm working on, I work on them not because of some technical misunderstanding, but because we don't understand why the people involved are making the choices they make. That is the overwhelming issue at hand. And that drives so much. So perspective taking, resilience. I can give you a big, long list, but my favorite, one that completely coincidental is worth writing a book about, is construct purpose. Sometimes goes by the name of life meaningfulness, strength of purpose, purpose in life. They essentially all define the same construct. Do you have something in your life that's bigger than you? Something that would take more than a lifetime to complete? That is my operating definition because, again, I need numbers, so let's give this something we can run with. So how do we build people rich in these foundational skills, this meta-learning, learning how to learn, that contains things like core cognitive abilities, like working memory span, that can be changed early in life, and resilience, and perspective taking, and analogical reasoning, and purpose? Well, by the book. And I suppose you might be able to find out because you voted. So the last 10 minutes isn't going to be the punchline. The last 10 minutes is going to be who we are in a world defined by purpose. And I said it had a good and bad part. And let's see if we can squeeze them both in. I don't want to leave you hanging on the good part. So the bad one started with a giant company that asked me to come in and give a keynote for them and then lead a little wargaming exercise. Future of work scenarios. And their global up-and-coming executives participated as well as partner multinationals. So these highly educated, brilliant, ambitious, motivated people came in and ran this war game. And the first year, this funny thing happened. The scenarios were given to them ahead of time, which included a list of 4 sort of solutions they could choose from, kind of weirdly turning wargaming of future of work into a well-posed problem, as though it was. What is interesting, in none of this did anyone ever say, you know what, I reject all of these answers, boo. Brilliant, smart, educated people, global executive leadership. No one threw up the table and say, I reject all of this. Not a single person. But what was interesting is that first year, people would come up to me before the session and say, Dr. Ming, I mean, obviously A. Of course, it's so transparently obvious that A is the thing I'm supposed to choose. But B, Mr. Burns wouldn't choose B. Like, that's absurd. Why is it even there? So then the scenario starts, and they learn that it wasn't just the material they were given, but a big mass of material, way more than they could possibly read within the 30 minutes they had available to them. Then they had to collaborate with other of these up-and-coming executives on teams. And then finally, they had to make their choice on a stage in front of the global leadership of the company. Every single person made the choice they themselves had identified as morally wrong. And more interesting to me as a cognitive neuroscientist, they all had complex explanations about why they were mistaken at first, and now they fully understood what needed to happen. So that's story one. We ran that then as a controlled experiment for 2 more years, and again. Not everyone exhibited that behavior, but no one rejected the proposals in the first place. No one said, the one thing I desperately needed Robin and all of my employees to do, Dr. Ming, you're wrong. This whole scenario is wrong. That's what I need. I don't need you to tell me something I already know. I need you to pitch an idea I would never have come up with. Everything else I can get out of Claude or Gemini. Even if I don't know it, it will, and the two of us working together can probably figure it out. Your unique value to the world, a world in which all the well-posed problems have free answers in your pocket, is what would you do that's different than everyone else in the entire world? That's your value. That's what our education system should be teaching kids. Yes, learn how to factorize a polynomial. But why is that important? And what would you do with it that's different than every other kid in this school? Again, we go into so many more different issues. How do we have an education system that builds a sense of purpose? It turns out it doesn't matter for purposes, whether this is a spiritual thing or you have a religious purpose. Hey, that's great. It could be grounded in humanist. That's what it is for me. Doesn't really matter. It's something that's bigger than you. And so I have this other experiment I ran. Another big, giant multinational. I'm not naming them because it doesn't matter. You could swap them. I'm sure if we ran the experiment where everyone did the wrong thing, I can get it to work at any giant company. And this more positive story, I bet I could find everywhere too. So they came to me and said, Dr. Ming, what is the single biggest driver predictor of productivity inside our company that nobody's tracking? 430,000 people. And I thought, this sounds cool. I mean, again, I'm the idiot who thinks philanthropic projects can be found inside profit-hungry multinationals. As long as I get to tell everybody what I did, then I don't care if I think it's about people. You'd be shocked how often people pitch me their scammy crypto scheme thinking somehow this is about human development, but no. So go get elected president, and that's your best move. In this case, I did something kind of weird and nerdy. What if we thought of 430,000 people as nodes in a giant neural network? And the output of that network is whatever this company was interested in. Sure, quarterly share price. They also had longer-term value metrics they were using. Somewhere in a numbers game, you've got to have some numbers. But we also looked at division and regional. So we could look at a whole bunch of different outcomes. One thing I've learned in my life is there's no one number that says what's the value of a human life. So get as many of them as you can. All right, build this thing, and now let's run the model in reverse, what's called backpropagation. Literally, how does each individual employee of the company contribute to those global outcomes? Exactly the mathematical problem you have to work out to train a neural network. Then, given the things we know individually about each of those employees already being accounted for, how many lines of code are they getting written, how it's their deal volume, if they're a salesperson, all that sort of stuff. Let's account for that and see what's left over. So what we found was about 11% of the employee population accounted for 80% of the unexplained variance in productivity across the whole country. So about 1 in 10 employees drove what turned out to be one of the single largest sources of productivity in the company. Okay, but what was it? What did they do? Well, here's another thing that was cool. This was before the pandemic. We were doing contact tracing. First off, they shared all of their communications data. So we got to take all of their emails and chats and see what the real social network of the organization was and who said what to whom. And 70,000 people volunteered to contact trace them with a Bluetooth system that was, it turns out, already in place in the company. So I get to see people that just might randomly meet each other at a conference, happen to spend time together and chat. So who are this 11%? Well, the first thing I could tell you about them is whenever you spent time with anyone else, they all got more productive. So about 1 in 10 employees just seem to have this magic touch. Whoever they spent time with, and because we could see it repeatedly, again and again and again. And it didn't matter when or where. These could be their actual collaborators, or it could be random meetings at the water cooler, or chance meetings at global events. They seemed to make everyone better because they were hard-nosed realists that drove the bottom line. Well, I already told you what it was, so if you can't remember, then I do need to get into the dirty joke section of the talk and wake you up a little bit. But the behavioral thing that we saw, they simply helped. Without any obvious benefit to themselves, these 11% of employees simply helped solve problems. Sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. Someone needed to defrag the hard drive. Someone needed to refactor some code, like things that aren't directly helping any one person but had to get done, and they got it done. And everyone around them would get more productive. What is the actual behavior that we saw when we could look at their text messages or their interactions? They made sacrifices. The title of the book is Small Sacrifices. What psychological construct popped? The company was already doing lots of survey testing. We did behavioral measures of psychological constructs. Well, again, I already told you, strength of purpose. All of these people, the incredibly high correlation between this behavior, the productivity gains, and strength of purpose. But here, I'm out of time, is the punchline. I call it the purpose paradox. Right? We're all supposed to be rationally self-interested. You know, assholes, but not too much. This is what all liberal economic theory tells us. And I am radically moderate. I believe in anything that works, and for a wide variety of things, I believe in markets. And that's all great, but here are people that are not being rationally self-interested, and we see the productivity of the company. Are they just taking advantage of these employees? Well, here's the cool thing. People that score higher in strength of purpose live longer. Think of almost any biomedical metric you want to track: insulin sensitivity, all-cause mortality, central body mass, track any of them. As purpose goes up, these things go down. Risk of death goes down. They have more friends. They go further in their education. They're happier. They make more money, both in terms of wages and wealth. And in a new paper that just came out, they have a 28% lower risk of Alzheimer's. Everything you'd want to be true about you, in this case, when you're 65, is more true of people that have a purpose in their life, that have life meaningfulness. And this is a changeable thing about people. You can build a purpose, because it turns out, as I was saying earlier, the actual purpose itself is a choice. It itself is a construct that you get to build. Pick something good. Change the world for the better. My favorite way of putting it is the classic old saying, the world gets better when old men plant trees. The gist of this story, whether it's how to robot-proof our kids, teach them how to plant trees, even though they're never going to shade under those leaves. We'll all be long gone before these trees grow and give value back to the world. And yet, the people who plant those trees don't just make the future better, they have better lives. It is the weirdest paradoxical thing. It's as though I told you that all of life was a grand race, and it's the people who stop and help the other racers that end up winning. It doesn't make any sense unless everything we know about it, economics here, is wrong. So this is the punchline now of my 2 talks. We are both of these people. We are the ones who did the thing we said was morally wrong. And we are the ones capable of living for something bigger than ourselves and improving our lives and everyone's lives around it. We're both of those things at the same time. We're like quantum mechanics. We are in superposition, multiple selves. When people say it's not the destination, it's the journey, I don't think they understand how importantly true that is. Because the same destination, the exact same person will make different choices based on their journey. How do you robot-proof your kids? Never let the robot give them the answers, ever. Never let them do the hard things. In fact, the exact opposite. I only use AIs to make my life harder in the ways that make me better. Gemini, here's the next chapter of my new book. You are my lifelong nemesis. You are my greatest enemy. My entire career, you found every mistake I've ever made and pointed it out to the public. Explain to me now in detail every way in which I'm wrong and what I might do about it. And here's a cool thing you can do with AI. Oh, Gemini, now you're my next bored audience that doesn't understand why any of this is relevant to them or what they should do about it. Explain to me how to make this story connect with their lives in a way which would transform them, not just me. We call this productive friction. AI that forces us to be better. The assumption is that the value of AI is it makes us all hyper efficient. It does the easy work so we can all focus on the creative work. Read the book. It's not the way it works out. You make it easier to write emails, guess what you get? More emails. Why would having a bunch of bots send emails at each other make you more creative? Build models that help you be creative, that challenges you to be your best self, and including challenging you to be the version that makes the courageous choice. I really will close here. If you do not practice courage when it's easy, you will not be the person you thought you were when the journey takes you to a moment that the world needs you to be your best self. It's true of you and me. Of course, I'm perfect in every way. Our kids, our employees. In a world where all of the answers are free, it's time to go plant trees tonight without waiting for anything more. If you want an amazing life, you have to give it to someone else. Thank you so much. Thank you.